Fashion is such a brilliant tool for communication and expression. But I think because of those really lovely aspects, the social and environmental impacts have maybe been slightly overlooked.
My name is Rebecca, and I grew up in the fashion capital of the world, Paris. I love shopping, but I also want to know, what am I really paying for?
We have to take what we're putting on our bodies every day slightly seriously.
Animals disappear into fashion objects in a way that's very troubling and in a way that's intentionally hidden.
It's a form of moral insanity that we justify this behavior in any kind of way.
No one wants to talk about the animals used for shoes, bags, and clothing.
We're in this system that has normalized cruelty on a massive scale.
Fashion brands are selling a dream, and they don't want us to see the reality, but I have to find out what's really going on.
This is an industry that don't want society to understand what they do. They don't want their secrets shared with the wider public.
Of course they know what they are doing. It's part of the business to have a very weak traceability.
I think that it will make it a lot harder for people to support these products, knowing where they came from.
Is it acceptable to kill animals for fashion?
That is a very big question.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Plant-Based News Live here on YouTube. I'm your host Robbie Lockie, co-founder and creative director here at Plant-Based News. We're very excited to welcome Rebecca Capelli. She is the director of an exciting and powerful new film called Slay, which is available live and for free on the amazing Water Bear platform, which you just saw the pre-roll ad for. Rebecca is an award-winning French filmmaker and animal rights activist based in Switzerland, and as I said, she's a producer and director of Slay. Rebecca's work aims to create a cultural shift and to empower people to become advocates for animals, the planet, and vulnerable communities. Rebecca also directed and produced Let Us Be Heroes in 2018, an award-winning short exploring the impact of our food, lifestyle choices on our planet, our health, and our values. It actually premiered here on Plant-Based News' YouTube channel, which was amazing. So let's bring in Rebecca. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure, and one honor to have you on the channel, because obviously it was so great to host your film back in 2018. Can't believe it was 2018. Time has flown by so quickly.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, that was the end of 2018. And then I think a couple months after we premiered Let Us Be Heroes, I started shooting Slay. So a lot happened indeed.
So obviously this is your second film. Let Us Be Heroes was your first. Tell us a little about the background of this film and how did it come about, the making of it?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, Let Us Be Heroes is really a short film. It's about 41 minutes. And at that time, when I made it, it was based on a lot of public talks that I was giving. And I didn't have the ambition to make films, to be honest. And what happened is that Let Us Be Heroes was received really, really well, and it happened very effortlessly. And I thought, well, let's just make a feature film. And when I thought about a few topics that I could think about, I had another idea before Slay, and I realized very quickly that it was quite impractical for a number of reasons. And then it just came up that if I looked at my life and my background and how much fashion I had in my closet, etc., then I decided to focus on fashion. And the main reason for Slay, obviously, was that there's been The True Cost. That is a great documentary that I think opened a lot of people's eyes when it comes to the impact of fast fashion on the planet and on people. But I felt like there was a huge blind spot and a gap in terms of animals that are not discussed at all in fashion. We're talking about entire industries like the leather, the wool, the fur industries, and many more industries that rely entirely on the exploitation and slaughter of animals, but that make them completely invisible. They are not discussed in the mainstream media. While we are discussing today, thanks to a lot of great films, Cowspiracy, What the Health, and many more, we are discussing in the mainstream of, like the impact of animal agriculture on the planet, but also the diet on health. We also have a lot of discussion around plant-based meat and innovation, etc., a lot of debate, but we just don't have anything before Slay about the animals. A lot of groups and activists are working on these issues, some of them for decades, but it's always, I found, a kind of like a margin, a fringe conversation that's happening. And so I wanted to make Slay to change that.
Amazing. Well, I've seen it myself and it was an incredible film, very moving. So if you are unsure about watching this film, please do watch it. It will really change your view on the fashion industry. And as we have said, and it's said across the marketing of this film, it is definitely the film the fashion industry doesn't want you to watch. However, let's dive into the film itself. So my first question really is, like, what is the most shocking thing that you found out when you created this film?
So that's a question that comes up a lot, actually, with journalists and everything. For me, the most shocking is how widespread this problem is, the scale of the issue, and how a lot of these things are really accessible if you show up. So, like, we just need to show up and go somewhere, know a little bit where to go and interview the right people, talk to the right people, and you find right away it's hidden, but it's not hidden. So if you show up tomorrow in Kanpur, for example, that is one of the biggest leather processing centers in the world, right? And in India, you can see right away the impact that the leather industry has on people. You can see the chemicals, you see the pollution, and you see the massive scale of it. So I think for me, like, the most shocking part was really, if we just go and if we have an open mind and we open our eyes to what's going on, we can really see the reality and the truth. And I thought in many instances that I would have to dig deeper. So I want to mention, let me backtrack a little bit. Slay is an unscripted documentary, which is really important to mention, because I did not go out and shoot based on the script. We started to shoot and thinking, okay, we need to go to this country or that place. We need to talk to these kind of people, and we had a few experts in mind, but a lot of it came along. As we were shooting, we discovered what was really the story. And everything that you see in the film is first time on location. We did not go like 10 times to find what we found. That to me is shocking.
Absolutely. It's the kind of rawness of it, and I can attest to that. The film really shows the rawness of your reactions, the reactions of people that you speak to. It's you can feel the authenticity in the film when you experience and watch it. My next question is just really a broader one about the various animal products that we use in the fur in the fashion industry. So most of the general public are absolutely disgusted by the use of fur, and many people refuse to wear it. But a lot of human kind is completely oblivious to the sort of the impact of leather and wool, which is featured in the film. Why is it that you think that people don't have the same reaction to leather and wool that they do to fur?
Well, that's a great question. I think so. We have Joshua Katcher, who is an expert in the film, who's author of Fashion Animals and a designer, a long-term, advocate and an activist in that field. So what he says is that animals are everywhere in fashion, but they disappear into fashion objects. And I think there's this huge disconnect between the fact that we are wearing skins like it's the Middle Ages, at a time where we are talking about artificial intelligence and we have all this technology that is available to us and all this innovation that is available to us, but we are still wearing skins. So I do want to touch on real quick on how widespread it is. So fur, we're talking about over 100 million animals that are killed every single year for fur. It is on the decline in the West, especially. It is also on the decline in China, but we are still talking about millions and millions and millions of individuals that are caged and slaughtered in very, very violent conditions. So the fur industry is still pretty active, I have to say. I think it would be a mistake to think that it's finished. Most brands have dropped it, etc. The fur industry is very much fighting back. They've been, spreading a lot of greenwashing messages in the media for the past few years. So I think it's important that we really stay on top of it as well. When it comes to fur, the animals are exclusively, most of the time, right, slaughtered for their fur. And because leather is, in the case of the other skins, the fashion industry and the skin industries, I would say, rather, is hiding behind the meat industry. And so they say, well, no, it's a byproduct. It would go to waste. It's better for the planet. It's biodegradable, etc. And these are all lies that we uncovered. And anyone who would actually want to challenge and, again, look at these claims can do it. By the way, so we listed all the facts and sources on the website slay.film. So I think in the terms of all the other skins, the thing is the animals are slaughtered for dual purpose. They are slaughtered for meat and for their skin as well. So most people don't know that the wool industry is a slaughter industry. This is something that we cover in Slay. So Slay covers only fur, leather, and wool. And then we couldn't cover everything. Like we couldn't cover feathers, exotic, etc. But it is standard today that we are absolutely, again, exploiting and killing animals for fashion. And so in some cases, the leather is the byproduct of the meat, but in some cases, it's also the main product, and the meat becomes the byproduct of the leather. In terms of calf skin, for example, or lamb skin, where these skins are very soft because, of course, they are from babies, and they are, the most expensive. And in these cases, the value of the animals is mostly the skin, and then the meat becomes a byproduct. So I think there's a lot of that. The industries also have been very smart in their messaging, and they have been spreading a lot of, again, greenwashing and ethics washing into the public for many, many years. So the first reaction that people would have, and maybe we'll touch on that, is, if it's not animal, then it's plastic. And then, they turn the debate about what happens to the animals around the debate about plastic. And you see that this is textbook greenwashing. It's happening over and over. Woolmark just released a video last week, or just a few days before Slay released, about wear wool, not fossil fuels, and there's not one single sheep in this advertisement. So
you speak on wool. It was actually my next question. Wool is often viewed as a very innocent fabric. It's natural, it's biodegradable, and the wool industry would love us to believe that it's completely innocent and a wholesome industry. Why is it that this industry seems to be so hidden? Because if you watch Slay, you'll see the truth about the wool industry, but yet I would say 99% of people today don't really know about the horrors behind the wool industry.
Yeah, so we don't know. And I want to also say that Slay is not an anti-fashion film. It's not a film that is judging people for having purchased these products. I think it is really, the aim is to educate all of us. And so with the right information, we may be in a better position to make better decisions, right? So in case of wool, I used to have a lot of wool myself. And yes, you just think that it's okay. We have to shear them anyways. And you may think that maybe there's a rough handling at the time of shearing, and you may see some videos about some really rough handling of animals at that time, but you think that's about it. And you always think that, wow, that's just an isolated case, it's just a bad farm, etc. So the reality of it is that, again, the wool industry is a slaughter industry. So first of all, the sheep have been, and I'm going to be specific about Australia here, which is one of the major producers for merino wool, which is one of the finest wool, big communication, big money behind that as well. So the farmers themselves are under a lot of pressure to produce a huge amount of wool. And of course, that has a ripple effect all the way down to the animals. Animals are bred to selectively bred to have more twins and triplets. Again, that's for profits purposes. And in Australia, a practice that is quite common is to have the sheep and the ewes have their babies, have the lambs in the winter. That way, when they grow during the spring. There's more lush, grass, etc. And so there's less cost involved than if the sheep were born in the spring or in the summer. So of course, for an animal that has to birth maybe twins, maybe triplets, but even just one lamb, Australian winters can be pretty rough, and it's wet, it's cold, so you have a huge issue of mortality. You have 15 million lambs that die every single year in Australia just because of this practice of winter lambing, and many of them are merinos. So that's, let's say the animal survived the first 48 hours, and then there's a lot of mutilation involved. There's tail docking, just cutting off the tail with a hot rod. There is the castration for the males. There is also mulesing, that is a practice that is still happening. And in some places, there's no requirements for painkillers for that to happen. So you do have so much mutilation and again, suffering going on, all the way to when the wool quality decreases, then they're not so profitable anymore, and they are sent to slaughter. So a sheep has a life expectancy of about 12 years, and even merino sheep are actually sent to slaughter around 5-6 years old, and they can be slaughtered on the ground in Australia or shipped on live exports to be slaughtered, let's say in the Middle East.
So the wool industry obviously has a powerful sort of, a way of, like all these industries, kind of keeping the truth from people. You mentioned then, you touched lightly on leather, leather being a byproduct of, a lot of people believe that leather is actually a byproduct, and obviously leather features heavily in the film as well. Why is it that so many people, where does it come from, this notion that leather is a byproduct? Because I know many people who are kind, compassionate, kind of animal-loving people who wear leather, who are vegetarians themselves, who believe that leather is a byproduct. But where does this, and it is a myth, isn't it? Like, where does this myth come from that, leather is just a byproduct, and then if you're a compassionate vegetarian, that wearing leather isn't a problem?
Yes, of course. So I just want to backtrack a little bit on wool, because you mentioned earlier the sustainability aspect of it. Wool as an unprocessed fiber with no dyes is biodegradable, yes. But again, the wool is processed, has to be processed to be worn, has to be processed as well also with dyes. So let's say if the wool is dyed with some dyes that are not biodegradable, the wool is not going to be biodegradable. And then you have this huge, again, animal agriculture impact that is associated with the wool products that the wool industry is completely denying, and just say, well, no, it's okay, it's just the wool and it's great for the planet, and we need to keep these sheep on deforested land, and that's land that we could be rewilding, that we could be returning to indigenous communities. So there's a lot of issues associated with that. When it comes to leather being a byproduct, I think I think, I mean, it is a co-product. Again, I think we just need to look at things as they are. And I do know, and I do have friends as well, as you mentioned, who are vegetarian and compassionate people who do not suspect for a moment that they are that they are wearing the skins of animals who were in part slaughtered for that reason. So the leather industry is worth several hundreds of billions of dollars. It is not a charity trying to make use of waste. It's really important that we understand the powers at play. And I think we also need to understand, I think the disconnect happens because we call it leather instead of skin. And that's one thing that I try to do in the film, and also pushing the film out. When I'm talking about animal skins, this is not, when we start labeling it something else, then we have another layer of disconnect. So I think calling it what it is, it's a skin of animals that is processed with a lot of very harmful chemicals that has a huge impact on the planet, on workers, on vulnerable communities.
That was actually my next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
People that are involved in these industries, and we often say at PBN that animals aren't the only victims of the animal agriculture industry.
Right.
I'd love you to talk a little bit about the damaging effects on workers, the health effects on workers who work with things like leather. As you just mentioned, there's so many chemicals. What actually happens to people who are directly involved in producing these products?
Yeah, so one thing that we didn't touch on slide, but I do want to mention, there is also the cost on the human cost of slaughterhouse workers. These people are absolutely traumatized to do these jobs that are absolutely grotesque and that lack any dignity you can give to a human being. So we don't cover that in Slay, but I do want to mention that because before it even becomes a skin, someone has to do that job, right? And we have images of that, and I couldn't put it in the film because Slay is not graphic. I want to keep it that way. I want Slay to reach the maximum, audience, and some of these images are just not possible to share to a wide audience. It doesn't mean we won't share them. I will work with some groups to share them, but it's not in the film. So in terms of the people that are affected by the leather industry, so most of the leather is produced and processed in the global south. So these are countries that have very poor environmental laws or no laws in that regard, that have very little or no protection of the workers. And people, you have, again, millions of people that are dependable on these industries for livelihood. But we are not talking about, again, dignified work, well-paid work, with a living wage or anything. We're talking about people who work, elbows knee deep in chemicals with no proper protection. So the health issues that you have on the population of workers include anything from skin disease, leprosy. The leprosy rate in Kanpur is very high, and you have also a lot of kidney disorders. You have a lot of cancers as well, and these go undiagnosed because you are talking about vulnerable communities that do not have access to healthcare. They cannot go to a doctor and get a diagnosis or a treatment for what they have. So it's really underdiagnosed. That's for the people who work in these industries, right? And then on top of that, you have the local communities that are affected by the waste, the chemical waste that is coming out of tanneries. Because in Europe, again, in some places now, like for the last few decades, Europe have cleaned up their act, right? So Italy, you cannot just dump chemicals in the river. It's not allowed. I'm not saying it's 100% not happening. I don't know. But today it's not supposed to happen, right? But in these countries where there's no such law and regulation, then this is happening. And this chemical waste leaks into waterways and irrigation system. And it even, creates issues for the farmers themselves who are working with crops. So we interviewed a farmer in a little village right outside of Kanpur, and he's completely crippled. His hands are crippled. He cannot work anymore because of the chemicals that are, in the soil. The kids cannot play near the irrigation water because it is completely full of chemical waste. And so you have this, again, communities that are already vulnerable, already poor, already trying to make a living being, farming and having a livelihood. But on top of that, you have this vicious circle of poverty that is keeping people in poverty over and over again. Because if one or several of the breadwinners in the family cannot work, then of course they cannot educate the kids, and there it goes. So I think one thing for Slate that was really important was not just to go to China or India and say, look at these countries, how bad it is. We also went to Italy to look at how does it look like for made in Italy. And in Italy, although the chemical waste is disposed, you do have the same smell of rot and chemicals as in India. It's the same smell, very irritating already when you're walking around in some of these areas. And you do have a lot of problems with immigrant workers who are working with heavy machinery. These are very dangerous machines to process skins, again, with chemicals or with some of the tanning steps. And so you have a lot of hazards, but you also have a lot of health issues that can be because of the exposure to these chemicals. You can have health issues and cancers showing up 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years after exposure. So even if in the best case scenario, let's say, again, made in Italy, that has such a big promise of quality and luxury, and again, it was in Tuscany. We didn't go down to Napoli for fast fashion. We were in Tuscany, where a lot of luxury brands actually outsource some of their tanning process, and there's a lot of the supply chain there. But the skins anyway are coming from all over the world. They can come from India, they can come from Brazil, they can come from deforested land. There's a huge issue of traceability, but at the end of the day, I think it's not so much about trying to impose traceability on something, it's about reviewing completely the current system.
Amazing. If you're just joining us, I'm Robbie Lockie. This is Plant-Based News. If you've just discovered us on YouTube, we're a vegan and plant-based channel talking about all things vegan and plant-based, spreading information and knowledge about the plant-based and vegan lifestyle. We're joined today by the amazing Rebecca Capelli, who's the director of Slay, a brilliant and moving new film that is available to watch for free. Yes, for free, on no charge, on the Water Bear Network. Right, so the next question really is just about something called humane washing, or as it's often called. When you made this film and you sort of experienced all these things and these places and these locations, obviously there are companies involved who are producing fashion products. What are some of the most outrageous examples of humane washing or greenwashing that you've ever seen? Because there's lots of organizations out there who talk about how green their product is and love to spin a yarn about how wonderful it is for the environment compared to vegan alternatives. So I'd love to hear what the most outrageous one that you experienced was.
I have to tell you that actually I feel like these industries are becoming lazy and they think people are stupid, because they use, whether it's the fur, the leather, the wool industries, they use the same arguments over and over. It's always about attacking the alternative. It's about always labeling the alternative as being plastic-based, polluting the planet, leaking microplastic into the ocean. So it's really textbook. You see that over and over all the time. It is as if we are not living at a time where there are innovations, and there are innovations, and some of these innovations actually contain zero plastic. An innovation like Mirum, for example, that is already out and available. Of course, it's not yet available to scale, but it is available for commercialization. There are brands working with Mirum, and it is accelerating at a very, very fast pace. So you will see always the same argument that it's a byproduct, it's sustainable, animals are natural, therefore it's sustainable, and it's biodegradable. But again, you just dig a little bit, and obviously we did a lot of research to look into that. But the more I see it, the more I realize that it's very, very shaky ground. It's not serious science at all. There's no science behind that. So that's one of the key things that I think I would encourage everyone to look at. Again, the messaging is the same, no matter what animal exploitation industry is talking about. In terms of humane washing, you have people from the fur industry sitting down and saying with a straight face that it's very humane, that the animals are taken out of their natural environment, which is the cage, which is, for starting, not the natural environment for a mink, a fox, a raccoon, a chinchilla, any animal. No animal natural environment is a cage. So yes, they would sit with a straight face and tell you that it's very humane and it's great, and they usually they try not to talk about the animals, but they will talk instead about traceability. They will talk about animal welfare. They will say, oh, we give animals 5 freedoms, and I don't have them on the top of my head, but it's access to fresh air, fresh food, water, something like that. And yeah, so these animals have water, not all the time. The thing I think is they have food, if you can call it food, and again, not all the time. And I think the key thing is they call investigations myth. But every single time there is an investigation, and every single time someone shows up to an animal exploitation facility, we find horrible things. And that's just the real face of these industries. So the humane washing is, again, they try not to talk too much about the animals. So they will focus more on attacking the plastic and the vegan alternatives. That's the core of their message. They don't want to talk about the animals. And if you do talk about them, they will just talk to you about animal welfare, that they care about it so much, that an animal has to be treated well to make good fur or to produce a good skin. So, for example, you will see the leather exploitation, the leather syndicate in France. They will say, well, we don't want to be careful, farmers. Don't put barbed wires on your properties because it can scratch the skin. It's not that they want to protect the animals. If they want a clean skin, a soft, flawless skin, to sell for more profit. That's the bottom of it.
Absolutely. Let's turn to the audience. There's a couple of questions here. Let's see what people have. Hopefully people are keeping it clean in the comments. This is a good one. So this person says, Peter Cunningham says, what should I do with my clothing that I still have before I went vegan?
Yes. So Slay, again, I do encourage everyone to watch Slay. It's for free. It's on Waterbear. You just sign up and you have access to it. For me, it's been always very important to make sure that films were accessible to a large amount of people and for free. So Slay really supports the stance of the nonprofit called Collective Fashion Justice that is founded by Emma Hackinson, that embraces a concept of the fashion system that should be just for all. So a concept that is ethical and sustainable for people, for planet, and for the animals. So my thing is, number one, the fashion industry in general has a problem of production, overproduction. We are at the point where every production of any garment today, vegan or not, is overproduction. We have to be real with that. There is enough material in the world to, we should be able to stop. So I do not encourage people to buy more things. So number one is use what you have, and then you can swap with friends, you can thrift, you can look at these options, secondhand. But when it comes to what you do personally with your own items, I think that's a really personal decision. So for me, for instance, I got to the point where I became too self-conscious and too bothered by the fact that I would be having the skin of a calf on my shoes, on my feet. I felt like I'm walking on the skin of an animal, and I would not wear a jacket made out of puppy leather or dog leather. And therefore, I would not wear either right now the skin of any animal. But again, that's a personal decision. And I have to say the harm is done. So use what you have, number one. And if you really, really feel bothered, then you can look at what is available on the market. And there are great brands doing great jobs and great designs with, again, visually striking materials, great designs, great products that exist. But again, I think we need to all be mindful about our consumption.
Absolutely. There's one more question from the audience, and it's from J Mitchell 099, and they say, what can vegans do to make vegan friendly clothing more readily available? I find it very difficult to find inexpensive alternatives.
Yes. So of course, alternatives are always more expensive because they are alternatives, but as we are pushing forward and they become the norm, they are becoming more and more affordable. I think we also need, of course, there's a price tag on the product, but also there's a huge cost associated to an animal-based product, for instance, and just because we don't pay it on the price tag doesn't mean that there's no price that has been paid. It has been paid by others. It's been paid by the animals. It's been paid by the people, the workers. It's been paid, for the planet, and ultimately we pay the price for that on a different level. But to be really, really concrete and realistic, I think again there are a lot of great brands looking at these alternatives, and I mean it's becoming more and more available. So finding something that is made of quality and keeping it for a long time, and not, we need to really move away from this, again, high consumption thing. We don't need 10 jackets or 20 pairs of shoes. If we have, we look at some brands and the work they're doing, I think, yeah, we just downsize a little bit and we buy better. We buy less, we buy better.
What about thrift? Like, do we really need to be buying brand new clothes all the time? As you pointed out, there's so much clothing that has been produced. I think a friend of mine who worked with Maggie Baird on a big super swap at Billie Eilish's concert said that there are enough t-shirts made on Earth today to last about 9 generations or something like that. There's so much being made and so much ending up in a landfill. We're at a time where there's too much of everything, and this sort of throwaway lifestyle where we just consume has got to end. We've got to learn to turn to things like secondhand, and there's nothing wrong with buying secondhand clothing. In fact, more and more people are switching to shopping in thrift stores. You can find some cool stuff.
You can find a lot of cool stuff, and again, I think thrifting is number one. Like it's really something that should become the norm for everyone. And I would love to see, again, designers using materials that already exist instead of producing new garments. But that's in their hands. In our hands, I think thrifting is a great option. Definitely, we need to stop buying. And again, it's not helping anyone, not even us. You're just spending this stupid amount of money on something that. It's just a thing, right? So we need to shift away from that.
To clarify Art's question, Art was asking about keeping your previously owned animal products like leather jackets and things like that. Just to reiterate and to understand what you said, it is a deeply personal choice to make, because if you have leather jackets that might be from your deceased father or something from your great grandmother, these might be gifts that you or family heirlooms that you might want to keep. But some people who work in the vegan advocacy space, for example, who are activists themselves, don't want to be reminded of the animal products that they work to remove from the food system, from the fashion system every day. So they might want to donate them to an animal charity where they can be used as bedding at a sanctuary. Fur is often being donated to animal sanctuaries and used as bedding on the floors for baby animals. So contact your local sanctuary, and I'm sure they would be very happy to accept leather and fur products, because they can be turned into bedding for beautiful little baby beings. But let's turn back to the questions on my list, because I would like to continue, because I've got time for a few more questions. The next question from me really is about fashion weeks that go on all over the world. Fur has been banned in the UK, I believe, or it's no longer shown in London Fashion Week. Are we seeing these changes across the world? Are we seeing other countries follow suit? I know leather was banned in Helsinki Fashion Week in 2019, but are we seeing other sort of big fashion platforms like that changing?
So the London Fashion Week has stopped using fur on the catwalk, but it's not an official policy, and it needs to become one. There are people working. I do want to say that there are people working within these, fashion weeks and fashion brands that do want to see a change. And the reception by fashion professionals to Slay has been really, really great. So we are working as well with fashion bodies, fashion organizations, and fashion professionals who are trying to do, to create a better fashion system to move away from skins. I think that in general, we need to be very well aware that the society and businesses do not become ethical overnight just because they become conscious, right? This is something that you need to actively work at, because the industries, again, have very powerful lobbies and, deep marketing money pockets that we don't have as activists. And so I think it's really important to actively engage with brands, actively engage with these fashion organizations to tell them, hey, like we need to move away, like fur, exotic skins, feathers, just the business of skins in general. We need to leave that behind, and move on to animal-free fashion, ethical fashion, sustainable fashion as soon as possible.
I think we've got time for one more question, Rebecca. Despite huge names like Dolce & Gabbana, Yves Saint Laurent dropping fur from their collections, and some other fashion houses like Fendi, I believe, are still using fur, do you really think that there's still a market for fur out there? Is this still something that is widely being used across the planet, or are more countries and more consumers moving away from it? Where are we currently with the sort of obsession with something like fur?
Right. So there's definitely a strong decline for fur in the West, in China, everywhere. And I think it is because the alternatives are becoming more and more available. They're becoming also more fun, more affordable. I mean, it's just becoming, and people are becoming more educated as well. So in terms of fur, they're not doing so well. But yes, you have brands like Fendi that shamelessly continues to use it on the catwalk. And it's just something that is still happening. And this is something that should be shut down as soon as possible. There's absolutely zero excuse for fur. I'm not saying that there is an excuse for leather. There's also no excuse for leather, but we are talking about an industry in the case of leather that you need to ensure a just transition for millions of workers as well. It's not the case about fur. Like fur farmers are shutting down anyway since COVID. There've been some public health issues. There's a problem of it's not a business. It's not a good business. It's just not a good business right now. So it doesn't make sense. And I think we're going to see more and more of that shutting down.
Amazing. One more thing before I let you go. How can people find out about the film? If you have a website, social media, how can people support the movement against animals in fashion?
Yes, sure. So Slay, you can follow slay.film on social media. So Instagram, we're trying to do some stuff on TikTok as well. And then we have the website slay.film, and we have created a hashtag, what should I wear instead? And that's part of a campaign that we work on with Collective Fashion Justice and a number of sustainable fashion organizations to educate the public and to again, like, we need to talk about the animals. We need to move away from skins, from this business and from this culture that we have of wearing skins. And so we have these campaigns happening. I really do invite everyone to support the work of Collective Fashion Justice. So you can do that via slay.film website or directly on Collective Fashion Justice website. It is founded by, again, Emma Hackinson, and she's been doing a great job with other people as well to work with brands to not only educate brands, but also, accompany them on this journey towards a total ethics fashion. So one of the things that we've done as well, and I'll just show it now. So for some of our premiere screenings, we printed this booklet that is actually super nice. That's Emma. But this is really education on skins, like the impact of skins on planet, people, animals, with alternatives. This is something that we are actually distributing to fashion professionals, and you can download for free the digital version on our website. So I think getting access to these resources, educating ourselves, and sharing with your favorite brands and your friends who work in fashion, and really anyone around you, organizing watch parties. This is a really great way as well to support the film, but ultimately it's really to support us as a collective moving towards a more ethical world, hopefully.
Amazing. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us on PBN. What a pleasure to hear a bit more about the film. Please do go and watch it. You can check it out on waterbear.com, where you can watch it and many other films, amazing, life-changing social change films for free. So thanks so much for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So we're going to go and watch the trailer one more time if you haven't seen it. And thank you for joining us. And as always, please don't forget to comment, like, and share. And see you next time.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Fashion is such a brilliant tool for communication and expression, But I think because of those really lovely aspects, the social and environmental impacts have maybe been slightly overlooked.
My name is Rebecca, and I grew up in the fashion capital of the world, Paris. I love shopping, but I also want to know, what am I really paying for?
We have to take what we're putting on our bodies every day slightly seriously.
Animals disappear into fashion objects in a way that's very troubling and in a way that's intentionally hidden.
It's a form of moral insanity that we justify this behavior in any kind of way.
No one wants to talk about the animals used for shoes, bags, and clothing.
We're in this system that has normalized cruelty on a massive scale.
Fashion brands are selling a dream, and they don't want us to see the reality, but I have to find out what's really going on.
This is an industry that don't want society to understand what they do. They don't want their secrets shared with the wider public.
Of course they know what they are doing. It's part of the business to have a very weak traceability.
I think that it will make it a lot harder for people to support these products, knowing where they came from.
Is it acceptable to kill animals for fashion?
That is a very big question.
Invincible.